So my name is Ellen Schindler. I'm partner CEO at the Zwarte, which is this architectural design company, and we have about 120 people divided over 3 offices in Groningen, Rotterdam, and Cologne. We do all type of work, a lot of cultural work, also museums. But for this presentation, it's interesting to know that I used to work at Cosman de Jong, and that's a exhibition design company. Very international. We did a lot of projects all over the world. I used to be a CEO there. And in this stage, I was very interested to see how what sustainability for us was as a company. And I'd like to share with you our journey that we did on researching the meaning of sustainability in the exhibition design. So I asked my colleagues at the office, what does sustainability for you mean? And there were a lot of questions. People were wondering, well, I don't know. And a lot of, the obvious was happening, the materials, FSC, LED. I'm just making, of course, a bit of a joke. But what we started doing is started a sustainable topic inventory. And of course, there were a lot of obvious things like Meatless Mondays, Skype no flight, and so we did all, what does sustainability mean for us and what could we do? So after this inventory, what happened is that, of course, at one point we had, we did a lot of inventories of these different topics. Meanwhile, I was hanging in the air, doing my bit of air biking, as you can call it in the Netherlands. And I'm sorry, this is just so not helpful that this presentation is going like this. I'm very sorry. But in the meanwhile, here are the museums trying to be sustainable. And how do you connect that? How do you connect all these different topics on sustainability, these items? And me trying to think, what can we do as exhibition designers? Meanwhile, flying all over the world, doing exhibitions all over the world and flying in these literally rocks from some places in the world to museums in Europe. And so you can really think, how is that working for you? And that to us became really a topic in the office. How is this working? How can we be on one hand trying to be sustainable and on the other hand making exhibitions that are not quite that sustainable? So of course, then the challenge came in. I like this quote of Bruce Mau: if things are bad, that's good. If things are terrible, that's awesome. So that to us was a challenge. And but interesting became, what role are you willing to play in this whole field? If you look at museums, they shifted from a museum as a scientific interview with some collections to a museum as a social catalyst, as energy, as force, to a museum as a contributor to public debate, a museum as a forum. So what is that, the museum of the future? What was that to us? And then you can look at it in very different layers. You have the building, and that, of course, now in my position as an architect institute, that's quite interesting. And you look at the BREEAM and the LEED certifications. But interesting also was to look at the content and how can we combine that, the building and the content, the exhibitions in the museum. And then interesting for us was to look at what role can we play. As exhibition designer, you are in the middle of this whole net of all these different type of stakeholders. It comes to light design, AV hardware, film, animation, contractors, etc. And you are in the center. And then we were thinking, let's redesign this design process. If you look at it, then 80% of the environmental impact of a product is predetermined in the design stage. That's a fact. And what we need to do is then sit at the table with the people who are involved in this whole loop. If you look at the old way of designing an exhibition, is that you have this linear system of looking at all the going from a museum to the design to the construction, and at the end you end up with trash and landfill. If you want to go more to a circular system, we started making an inventory of all the stakeholders. To us, what are the people that are all involved in this process of making an exhibition? And then trying to connect those in a more circular way, looking at them to see how can we all together contribute to this design process, and then closing that system. So looking at this, we thought we need to rethink this design process. And that's the inventory that we made in the office. We were looking at what are the different stages of the whole design process. You have a vision, we need an ambition, we have the users, etc. So all we looked at the system. And then also we looked at, so what questions do we have to ask ourselves? And then we also see what people need to sit at the table at what moment of the process. So then what do you really need? Well, you need, first of all, you need people that, as we call it, sit on a horse, be the knight in shining armor, and then try to see how can we all add to this, because that's the only way how you can get this system closed. So what is sustainability then within the museum context? If you really are very honest, and if we all are very honest, the most sustainable way of exhibitions is really no exhibition, because an exhibition in itself means materials, means flying around, means importing artifacts, means all kind of things. So if you really, that's just like we as architects, we say to ourselves, the most sustainable building is no building. But that's not the reality, of course. So then we were looking at, to us, what are the three main areas where we can look at integrating sustainability? First of all, we need to look at ourselves as an organization. We need to identify the ways to be more sustainable in our office. Then we can look at the design and the build and identify how to create a more sustainable exhibition and maybe building. And then, but the other very important part for us was the content. And that's how to identify how to achieve impact and transformation in stories. And for this last, because we all know that if you have some kind of engagement of people, they become aware, there is awareness and there is action. And that's how you get circularity in the whole exhibition design. Looking at the first thing of the organization, what we did, and this is not a scientific process, this is really something that we did to become more aware of what we as an organization can do. So we were looking at the analysis of the organization, at the insights that we got from current behavior, recommendations for future behavior, our own future behavior, and guidelines for in-house suppliers. So what we literally did, we looked at everything that came in the office and that went out of the office. And again, this is not a scientific research program, but what it did completely is made us realize, what do we actually use? So we calculated everything. We made Excel lists, charts, and looked at, so what did we, for 1 week, everything that came in and everything that came out as garbage. We made a list of that, and we also looked at what is our waste stream. We made a waste stream analysis. How can we do better in the future in our own behavior? And then also look at the in-house suppliers. We were analyzing, where do we get our food from? Where do we get our paper from? Where do we get everything from? So it's very basic. But what it completely did is that everybody from that moment on in the organization realized, okay, there's something that we can do actually, and we have impact as well. Because to us, that was practice what you preach. From there, we went to the design and build part, and we were looking at how can we create more sustainable exhibitions? And then you have the part of materials, you have the part of the design itself, the suppliers, and the business models. For the materials, we started making a material matrix, and we were looking at innovative developments, and we were looking at matching suppliers. This was interesting because immediately you saw some things that were really completely off and other things that were actually quite recommendable. If you look at this, I thought that was an interesting quote. Today, every medium-sized European city contains more copper than average copper mine. And that's a small leap to what I'm in the business that I'm in right now, the architecture business, which is interesting. They call it urban mining. And that means that that's a concept to recycle resources already available in the city. So what you look at what's available and how can we reuse that. So that was very interesting, for us, an interesting concept. The other one is that the material passports. There is this organization in the Netherlands, it's called Madastar, and what they make material passports that provide some insights in the materials that were used in the construction, how they were processed. So what you really look is every material has a material passport. Where does it come from? How can we reuse it? And how and that makes the dismantling much easier, and it gives really an insight in the materials that you use. So that to me, I put this in the presentation because to me that was so these are all tools of how you can look at materials, and the Stitch program I found highly interesting. But what we looked at the design then is where the 80-20 way of looking at things. And that's if you analyze some things that you are using or how you are designing, if you have, you know that 20% has an input has an 80% impact. So if you only take these 20%, if you analyze that, and if you find those that have the 80% impact, then you can have a huge impact just on a very small part. So you have to think of what causes that largest impact. And through that, you can do smart designing. What can you influence? And that's and then you can really look at what's easy to implement and where are the leaks, and on those you can focus. So instead of trying to cover everything in the design process and every material and every step that we made, we were looking at those 20% that had the 80% impact. If you analyze that, if you find those, you can be much more efficient. We looked together with Bruns, that's an exhibition design company. We have been looking at the life cycle analysis of the whole construction process, looking at the raw materials, looking at the manufacturing, looking at installation, exploitation, and end of life and dismantling. Also, we looked at the suppliers, not only for our own office, but also for the exhibition design. We made a procurement strategy matrix in which we analyzed the environmental impact, the customization level, and the supply risks. We also made a supplier assessment tool to look at what suppliers are we using and who do already have some kind of a sustainable impact strategy. And also we made strategic alliances with key suppliers and put a special emphasis on these, and also made bondages with them to see how can we put our energy together. Also, what we did is we analyzed business models. And to me, that was a quite interesting part. Looking at long-term commitments, dismantling and reuse, pay-per-use, sustainable classification system, and pollution sustainable budget. These were all models. I'm going to show you a few of them, like the long-term commitments. Of course, as much as we understand as designers that that museums would like to work together with different exhibition designers, we also try to convince museums of the fact that if you have a long-term commitment, we could reuse all kind of materials and think ahead. So if we make the first exhibition, we're already thinking ahead and ahead and ahead. And that there lies the 80-20 percentage also a lot. These were very interesting things to make a bigger impact. Pay-per-use also. So what you don't need, it's interesting, Thomas Rauw in the Netherlands, he's an architect, he started with this and he said, I don't need armatures, I need light. I need lux. That's what I'm paying for. So also with the whole AV media and if you have projectors, you know, why as a museum you don't need projectors, you need a projection. And so that's an interesting model to look at to see if you can pay per use. The other thing is a sustainable classification system. So what we looked at different dimensions, which is how modular is an exhibition. We were looking at the materials. We were looking at the moment of key supplier involvement. Are they going to be involved at the beginning or only at the end? And that has to do a lot with how can you negotiate with suppliers, but also the extent of key supplier involvement, not only the moment in the process, but also the extent that they are involved. And the supplier selection. And through this, we made some kind of grid in where we said, so we may have a baseline. This is what we always do, and this is what we always include. And then you have levels of maximizing sustainability in your process. And then to us, it was somehow we always talk about construction budgets. You get money to make something. But what if we also include a pollution budget? What if we say, if we are able to minimize a certain extent of or maximize the use of materials, how can we then get some kind of extra budget to include sustainability in our process? So in the end, we came really.
Ellen, we would like to ask you some questions. So it's
yeah, I have to
5 minutes left.
So to us, it was not sustainability, but it was circularity. And then the last one, and we're getting to the end, is how you can include content in in your strategy of sustainability. If you engage people, provide spaces and opportunities for ongoing engagement. If you empower people, generate relevant content to create meaningful impact, and also evaluate, so do prototyping, have data collection and evaluations. Because that's the way of what we like to, why we are including the content is if you, the Museum of the Future to us was, if you go into the museum with one idea in your head, it's always good to leave the museum with another idea. That's also to us sustainability. So I'm going very quickly here. Our next steps were to include a green team with coordinators, review systems, criteria, and policies. We were saying, well, you need small steps, but also realistic steps. That's how we also, that was very important for our process. And start with smaller pilot projects. Let me quickly go through this and go to the lessons learned. To us, it was, you need a strong kickoff with a team. You need resources. You need specialists. Team and roles should be very clear. Who does what in this whole process? And also, you need out-of-the-box thinking, experimenting. Customization is key. And not to forget to have key with everything. My last sheets, circular transformation, that was the title of this thing. What I like to say to my people at the office, my employees, is always, if you have something that you cherish, and if you have something that you want to take to another place, like we all do, we are here now with our museums, but we really want to include something new, and we want to go to a better place when it comes to circularity. The only way, that's why I love this, you know, you want to take this house to another place. The only way how you can do this is do it together and make a plan. Otherwise, the whole house will go crooked. And then here, why I want to end with this picture is, this is something, I mean, I've still sit in planes, I still sat in planes where people were smoking, but this is something we cannot imagine anymore. It's unthinkable. And that's really what transformation is about. That's one thing. And the last thing, transformation to me, is brushing teeth. And why brushing teeth? You don't get up in the morning and you freak out or you think, oh, I have to brush my teeth. You get up, you brush your teeth. That's what you do. And to me, circular transformation is something, it's like brushing teeth. It's just something we don't think about anymore. It's just something that we do. And that was the end.
Thanks,
And
Alice.
sorry for the technical hang.
Sorry for breaking in the say that you had to round off.
No, it's good that you were saying.
Yeah. It's an amazing way of thinking that you have introduced with this presentation, and I also remember that when I heard it a few years ago, I was quite inspired by it, especially because you make these combinations between the different departments or the different steps in the process. So your circular transformation is really a circular process that you are envisioning in the creation of an exhibition. But could you maybe, to illustrate it, maybe give one example of what a very successful example, sorry, an example of an example. Let's phrase it differently. Can you illustrate with one example how this successfully worked for you as an exhibition designer?
Yes, I can give you one example that very clearly is still in my mind, and it has to do with this picture, and that's really the long-term commitment. I remember having one museum that we did an exhibition for, and we saw so many chances, but the budget was extremely low, and it was very hard to also include their ambition on circularity. And we knew they were having, of course, like every museum, you have, how do you say, you have a lot of exhibitions going on in the following years. So we really invited the client to say, what if we do more exhibitions like one? And what if we actually then help you with meeting your ambitions on the field of reusing materials, but also meeting your budgetary ambitions, which were extremely low. And then we challenged the museum of including a few budgets of a few exhibitions, and then thinking, setting aside the budget that you need for content development, but for the exhibition itself, we were thinking of designing some kind of flexible system that we made completely different exhibitions. So there was no way of telling that it was one exhibition.
So you were combining budgets, you were combining materials, you were combining other elements of the different exhibitions, and that created that gave you more potential to create a good exhibition with a wider range or a better design.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And because having a few exhibitions in a row over the years, and we were saying, what if we look ahead 3 years and then combine that budget that you have, and from this really create something that you can reuse, because circular is not necessarily the cheapest way of designing things. It is just not, and that's the big problem. It is sometimes it takes more effort, it takes more research, it takes sometimes more expensive materials. But
I also remember, Ellen, the one example that you gave me, which I like very much, is because you say, yes, sustainability is not per se cheap. Sometimes you do want to choose for a more expensive material or a more expensive solution. But then you said, if you would then introduce, and you shared it with us as well, a pollution budget, or how did you call it? So a budget to take it out of the museum again. And then you can either decide for some materials to really go low on the price and to save money. And with some money that you save, you can decide to bring in a more damaging material, but take care of the aftercare of that material. So the way of thinking about the process and the steps that you need to take, that's actually the key element that you bring in your design process.
You already answered the question.
Yeah, perfect. Maybe it's good to round it off as well.
No,
because
but
we're 7 o'clock.
You have to think about different ways of not only I have this exhibition and I have this amount of time and this amount of budget. You have to think different in time. It's really like more a time machine where you can think, if I now include other budgets, if I think about if I can resell something already and make deals with this. So we played a lot with external parties and thinking, okay, we make this now, but we can use it in this museum. We even included different museums. And because as the exhibition designers, you are in different, working in different museums.
So even without the frame of one museum, you could make these circular transformations. That's interesting.
Yes, we were reusing the exhibition of one museum in another museum because there were elements in it that somebody else could use very well. But that's a very more wide and integral way of thinking.
Last question, but we have to be really short because we're running already in the time of Eric. How do you take this information or this knowledge into your practice now? How do you bring it into the architecture?
On the one hand, the architecture field is so much further when it comes to developing sustainability. The rules are also very stricter, so you have to think in a very different way. But what I do think is the integral way of solution thinking, including different stakeholders and including the whole chain of stakeholders in a very early stage, playing with including somebody in an earlier stage and then having benefit from that. So that's something that I learned here and that I try to integrate and using different specialists. Architects often think they know everything, which is not.
Thanks. That's a nice way of rounding off. Thank you, Ellen, for your presentation. And I think even though the technology let you down a little bit, it was a good, we understood it. Thank you very much.